Hello, my name is Nicholas Rosas. I am with the RNBSN Cohort 13 in Riverside, California. This is for Psych 3300 for Professor Tadevosian. My presentation will be on sexual orientation. Here are my contents. We're going to start with my introduction, move on to who this case study is about, and then we'll go over to inclusion and diversity challenges, um, what I found impressive, surprising, inspirational parts of the case study story, most important lessons learned, steps to ensure experiences are not repeated, my conclusion, and then just my references. So, my introduction. The topic for today's discussion is sexual orientation. I chose this as the research paper, has seven accounts of survival of bullying from members of the LGBT, I guess it's LGBTQ, but at the time LGBT community in their youth. Um, I think there's one positive story in there. Bullying still in it, but mostly there are negative experiences from each member, and they talk about how they're discriminated in school and not only school, but it can be at home. There's one event at church, which is quite telling and disturbing. Um, and we'll go over that as we go through. This case study is about revolves around individual experiences from members of the LGBT community. There's seven different stories. In the first story, they talk about a classmate who was a homosexual classmate or a homosexual student who was defended by a heterosexual classmate where he was being bullied, and the heterosexual classmate stepped in and actually defended him and told the bully to stop, uh, which was surprising and kind of strengthened the homosexual victim's faith in, not everyone is like how his bully was treating him. Second story is about how someone overcomes bullying by jocks, that involved rock throwing and name calling and isolation. The third is about a person being in the church and openly coming out as gay in the church and having the church turn their back on him and kind of discriminate against him, have him leave the church, try to get him to pray the gay away. The good thing about the ending of that story is that he did end up finding a church that was accepting of him and his lifestyle later in life. So that's a good ending for that one. And the fourth one, we get an experience of someone's opinion on how we basically can make a difference on Spirit Day and overcome the bullying, make people aware. The fifth story was about a college student who had the word fag written on his dorm room door, where his roommate left. He was isolated. He had no friends, and he was pretty bullied just because of his orientation. He ended up becoming the president of the LGBT club on campus. He created a safe zone. They would have annual drag balls, and he was forced to change through his adversity. So he was grateful for it, but at the same time doesn't like it, which is understandable. In the sixth story, we get a telling of what it was like to be gay in the 90s, which was probably very difficult and, hard for anyone. It was a less open time, and things were just starting to get okay with homosexuals being in public and being in the public eye. The seventh is basically a harrowing story about how a kid was bullied and beaten, got in a fight, and how his parents were mad at him about it, and his classmates isolated him for being a model and being feminine. And he just discussed how some extreme cases can be overcome through positive thinking. The common aspect of each story is just that someone stood fast in the face of adversity. They overcome it. They tell you how they learned a lesson from it and they didn't let them defeat them. So some challenges that the people face in each story, like we talked about, specifically prejudice. Each person had a form of prejudice just because of their sexual orientation, whether they were bullied or judged or prejudged. They were either thought of as feminine and weird and promiscuous just for being homosexual. That goes with the stereotypes. Not every homosexual is extremely feminine and loud, and not all of them are involved with drag or wear women's clothing. It's just more of a preference than anything else. Um, the discrimination was obvious and rampant in the stories. Each of them just because of their, like I said, their sexual orientation, or some weren't even out as gay, but still presented in a feminine manner. And they were still discriminated. They've also faced um, harassment and discrimination in public, not only in the church, where just because at a college campus they're discriminated, they don't have a safe place to go just because of their orientation, which is ironic since, statistically a lot more people on that campus are homosexual as well. So there should be a coming together where people can kind of say we need a safe area to be able to live and participate in our studies. The most impressive part of the story was the support. Some of it was a support and some of the shared experience where friends and family was actually supportive and helpful in making changes and standing with members of the LGBT community to kind of overcome bullying and discrimination and isolation. Um, it's always important to hear that we come together and help those that are being treated that way. The most surprising part was how common the prejudice was. I mean, it seems like maybe because it was before when they were younger, it was a different time. I know one of the stories takes place in the 90s, but it seemed like it was a common thing with most of the people involved in the story participating in it. So the majority versus the minority kind of coming into play. The most inspirational part was how each person did find inner strength, like I had mentioned, took a lesson out of it and used it to persevere and overcome their bullying and harassment, which helped them to grow, become stronger and more steadfast in their orientation, which is, you should be proud of who you are and what you do. The most important thing learned by researching these seven stories was that there's still work to be done about awareness in the LGBT community. Even to this day, there's discrimination and hate. Just because it used to happen doesn't mean it's not still happening. Um, I was made aware sometimes of my own prejudice, sometimes of my own joking manner, and not taking people's orientation too seriously. I can be, um, what's the word? I can be blind to kind of things that are insensitive, blind and insensitive, and that's through no meaning, but there's still the prejudice occurs. So I was able to kind of be more aware of those things and as they occur in my own life. Also came into terms with, times that I've been prejudiced towards homosexuals or times that I've seen it and I didn't step up or do anything about it. Just makes me think back to those times and makes me want to change it and be more aware of the people around me and how they interact. Ways to stop this from happening again is call out and question those who engage in that behavior. Even if you feel like, they're not being too serious, it's always good to warn them, say, hey, it's not the best way to behave, or you're not being kind. Um, you're not being very inclusive. You can be aware of when coming to terms, like I said, with your own bias in situations where have you failed or you've been prejudiced towards a certain group, that you can always make that right and make that better. Just because you were a bad person doesn't mean you remain a bad person. And also educating yourself with terms and respectful dialogue. Things change a lot, especially nowadays. Everyone has different terms and things they'd like to be called, so it's best to respect those things, look them up, stay current, and even ask individuals what would you prefer. In conclusion, this story really shined a light on the ways that the LGBT community are still, prejudiced against, the way that they're isolated, the way that they suffer discrimination, and it's still happening to this day, maybe in a less frequent, or maybe it is. I'm not too sure, to be honest. I don't go on these campuses that much to really know. But the fact is that awareness should still be brought. And although not all of these stories were negative, the bullying and harassment is still going on in our culture and can be promoted. So we should have to be aware of that and try and stop it. And like I said, call out those that you see participating in this behavior, especially if you don't agree with it, and try to include the people who are in these communities in regular things to help them feel like they're part of the community and to normalize them. And that way they can just be accepted. Some questions I had were these examples related? Were they all on a campus? How recent were these stories? Were they researched? Were they verified? And is there any link between these stories in terms of locations of occurrence? Did they all occur in the same state? Were they at a school? Were they all at schools, youth? Just some questions that came up while I was doing this research. And that was my presentation. I thank you for your time. And that's it.